Hi, and welcome once again to Fade to Black. On today's episode, we've got a review of City of Life and Death, as well as a look at some new DVD releases. With me, as always, is Alex. Alex!
Hey Thomas, how you doing?
I'm doing good. You're a professional as always, I see.
Fade to Black. I love Fade to Black.
Enjoy today's show.
I love the show. It's a great show. This week on the show, we're talking about City of Life and Death, a movie about the Nanjing Massacre that happened during World War II. The movie is directed by Liu Chuan, a Chinese director, and we're going to go to Sarah to give us a bit more information about the event that happened.
The Nanjing Massacre, or the Rape of Nanjing, was a historical event that took place during the Second World War between China and Imperial Japan. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese citizens were gunned down by Japanese soldiers, and many women were taken and used sexually by the Japanese army. The exact numbers are debatable, but according to China, over 300,000 were murdered during the siege and occupation.
Okay, we're back. Getting into the nuts and bolts of the review. I feel a little bad because even though I think it's a very powerful and important film, it's definitely telling a story.
You didn't like this film, Thomas?
I didn't like parts of it.
Okay.
I know, I'm a mean person, aren't I? The thing that really got to me was the visual element. It's written and directed by the same guy who's a young up-and-coming film director in China. And he feels to me like he's a writer first and a director second. He spends a lot of time on the story, and that's great. It's a very narrative-driven film, but I think he needed to spend more time looking at the visual element of this movie, because when you're dealing with a movie of this kind of subject matter, you need to be visceral. That's the operating word for any movie of this sort. It needs to pull the audience in and make them feel like physically ill. And maybe I'm desensitized.
Well, the film is in black and white, so it also, I think it tones down a bit of the violence as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It does give it a specific stylistic elements, but there is a lot of details lost in that.
Yeah. And
lack of color.
And the photography is very sharp. I kept noticing that. Everything is incredibly clear, and the contrast is very high. And I think if they'd made it given the image more of a texture, more of a grittiness or a graininess to it, it would have felt more it would have grabbed you more. The composition, the lighting, the editing, they just all felt very sort of cookie cutter to me.
I think it was, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think it was shot on digital, and when you are making a historical movie,
I'm not sure,
like a war movie, you kind of really need that old aesthetic film grain.
Yeah, exactly.
It definitely gives it like that specific look that you have in old films and war movies. And it's rougher, you know.
But as I said before, it is incredibly well written. It deals with some very heavy subject matter. I went in expecting a lot of sort of nationalism and flag waving and looking back at history with a bit of a skewed perspective.
There's a bit of that.
A bit of that, but they do try and counter it a little bit. There's one of the main characters is a Japanese soldier who is trying to deal with being caught up in these events and try and get his head on straight and just figure out what am I doing here.
It's true, because in a lot of these war movies, especially Chinese movies, the attackers or the Japanese people are often are portrayed as horrible people, and there's a lot of horrible people in this film.
Don't make no mistake, there's some bad stuff going on.
There is that one sympathetic character who's probably like the most important character in the film.
I would think so, yeah.
And apparently it was like a big scandal that in China they actually made this character likable. And I really liked it. I think his name is Kadokawa or something.
Yeah, that was the character's name.
And what did you think of the structure of the film? I feel like it was kind of split into two parts.
Yeah, very
right?
much so. It's I was marketed, like the film is marketed as a film about the massacre of Nanjing, but really that's only the first 40 minutes or so, which is largely just one long battle scene followed by the massacre.
It's very like a lot of explosions. And, they capture all the civilians. I think it's probably not the most brutal, but the most violent part of the film. There's a lot of like very specific brutal moments later on, but just overall the most violent part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then afterwards, they sort of jump forward a short bit, and it's basically dealing with the aftermath and the shock and
during the occupation of the city.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt that if they maybe turned that around and shown the events leading up to the massacre, and then had the massacre itself and the occupation, like a little bit of the occupation, have that be the tail end of the film, it would have made it more powerful because you feel more of a connection to these characters by the time that's happened.
At the beginning of the film, where we go straight into the war, but we don't know any of the characters. And even a few characters who kind of you think are going to be important just die in the first half of the film.
Yeah, exactly. You would see certain characters and they get a lot of screen time and you think, oh, he's going to be a main character, he's going to survive or something. But no, and they aren't even alluded to. Like if we found out that one of these characters was important to one of the survivors or one of the other characters and their presence was still felt afterwards, then it would have been okay. But it felt like we were watching the last 20 or last 40 minutes.
There was a very distinct separation between the first half and the second half. And I think the second half does get better because we meet these characters, this guy, the German guy who's trying to, who's actually there to defend the civilians.
Yeah, that was another interesting touch, is that this guy who's there and he's like loved by the civilians who are being captured because he's the one who's fighting for them. He's a German guy, and he's often seen wearing a Nazi armband. And it's like, wow, there are more than one side. There's shades of gray. That's good. That's the kind of thing I want to see in this kind of movie, not this kind of black and white starkness.
And you have his assistant, who is also a Chinese character. And he's one of the other main characters of the film.
Yeah, he's very important.
Yeah, and a lot of horrible things happen to him and his family.
Yes, definitely.
And even at the end, but it also portrays the Chinese characters as like very noble. So even at the end, that character has to make a sacrifice to save other people. And I think a lot of the Chinese characters, the more important ones, are almost finish up as martyrs.
They do. Well, there's a lot of martyrdom in this movie, almost a bit too much. I would find, like, I do acknowledge that what happened was horrible and there were a lot of brave people there, but it sounds terrible, but it's one of the most screamless massacres I've ever seen. It just happens so quick and it's so matter of fact, and you felt that like if some of the people were
would have liked to have a bit of that Battleship Potemkin staircase massacre, everyone crying and just overly dramatic.
Exactly, that exact sort of thing.
It seems that all the characters are just so noble that they're just like, we're ready to die and it's over. There's very little drama.
And that sort of detaches you from them because you don't feel a real sense of humanity with them. They're just these noble martyrs who are ready to die for their cause.
We've talked about a lot about the violence, but there's also a lot of sexual violence, and there's a lot of important female characters because the Japanese army just went out there and like raped a whole bunch of women, and they even kidnapped some. I think they had to have like 100 females.
Yeah, they took 100 female civilians
who were meant to satisfy the Japanese soldiers.
Yes. It doesn't hold back in that regard.
角川さん、終わりましたか？ありがとうございます。お前、声でかすぎるぞ。気持ちいい。
I mean, overall, it is a very powerful movie, but what bugged me the most is that it could have been more so. If they'd made it more visceral and more visually gripping, I think it would have had a much stronger impact on me. So overall, I came out of it feeling like there was a lost opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think I hated the film as much as you do, at least not the visual
Well, I
element.
didn't hate it. I just felt it didn't live up to its potential.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was stylized, not too much, but had a nice look. The part I did not like was just the two half structures of the film. Two half structures.
Grammar.
The part I didn't like was how it was. The part I didn't like was how it was split into two halves, and the first half was just really, really lame, and the second half I really enjoyed, and I feel like maybe if that had been the film,
Yeah.
and like the film's long enough that they could have actually cut out the entire first part.
It's a full 2 hours and 15 minutes, if I remember right.
So either just make the story about before or after, or just keep the second half. I just felt like there was just that divide.
Yeah,
that didn't
like
work.
it felt like the first half of the movie they were trying to market it as a war film,
Yeah.
whereas the second half was more of a historical drama.
Yeah, it was.
And it felt like too big of a divide. I see what you're saying. And
Well,
I definitely agree.
A lot of people have that complaint about Full Metal Jacket. Stanley Kubrick, there's like a big specific divide.
Yeah.
And well, I like Stanley. I like Full Metal Jacket, but I think this kind of had a similar problem. That they were very there's a very specific split between the two parts.
Yeah, it's always a bad sign when you can really see the division between acts, or like
There's just that one Japanese character that passes over, and that's pretty much the connecting aspect.
Yeah.
But even in the first half, you don't know him that well, so.
Yeah, and it would, like, if there were more characters in the first half, where like you meet characters in the first half, and you think, oh, they're going to be a main character or something because they're getting so much screen time, and then it turns out not so much. But if you'd found out that they were the father or the husband of a character from the second half of the movie, and they were still a presence, then it would have been all right. But the way they did it, it just felt like, yeah,
They need a better transition between those two parts.
Yeah, precisely.
I want to ask you if you would recommend it, but you seem as...
I think there are movies that are dealing with this kind of subject matter better. There are ones that show the brutality with a more with a better ability to grab its audience and keep them riveted and get them emotionally attached and get them really into what's going on. With this, I just felt there was too big of a divide between myself and what was happening. I didn't get that sense of tangible immersion that I should have.
Yeah, I think even when the really horrible things happen, there isn't that much investment in the drama. I agree. I'd recommend it if you fast forward through the first 40 minutes and look at it as a historical drama. And just that part, because I really liked it. But apart from that, maybe it's a pass.
I would say so too, I'm afraid.
That's our review for this week. Join us next week.
DVD releases! Yeah!
We're back, and I'm wearing a hat this time. This week, our DVD picks are going to be a bit different. We're going to do some TV shows. Thomas, I heard that apparently you come from the net.
I do come from the net. Through systems, peoples, and cities, to this place, CUTV. I am going to talk to you about a very precious part of my childhood, the very first fully computer-generated television program made right here in Canada, called Reboot. It was set in a computer, and I'm not talking about Tron. I'm talking about being set inside a computer. There's characters who are basically just 1s and 0 binary code. There are viruses. There's an episode where the paint program goes haywire, so everything's funny colors. It ran for about 4 seasons, predominantly on good old YTV, which was a staple of my childhood. And after years of demand and fan ravings, it has been released on DVD in the complete mainframe edition. And if you have fond memories of Reboot, check it out because it lives up to the memories by a large amount.
Reboot's really a great show because I think there's like so many like pop references and even like little geekier references to computer things that it might be are even more relevant now than they were back in the day. So good pick.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, my pick for this week is season 1 of Louie, which is a TV show on the FX network by written, directed, produced by comedian Louis C.K. Louis C.K. is very well known among comedian groups, but I think he's still not really broken into the mainstream like Dane Cook or other such comedians. But I think he's one of the funniest people in show business right now. He's coming to Montreal for Just for Laughs, so watch Louis season 1. It's very like awkward type of humor. It's very funny, very interesting type of aesthetic. There's like surrealist type of elements to it as well. Watch Louis and go watch Louis C.K. At Just for Laughs next month. He's a great comedian. The Cinéma du Parc will be showing the films of Terrence Malick next week. Most of them will be projected on 35mm, so don't miss this rare opportunity to see prints of what are considered some of the most beautiful films ever shot. Well, we're all sad that we don't have a segment this week. But join us next time, where we'll be covering events and doing interviews and having so many great things for the show. It's okay. It's okay. Have a week. Good week.